Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started here in a few minutes and make sure everybody's joined us. We want to hear from you, so maybe if you want to type your questions in the chat or just let us know where you're joining us from today while we get
I see a
started.
few familiar names. Welcome, welcome. Gloria, is that Gloria Levine? Our Downsizers Club, Gloria? Our
Levin,
fabulous, what?
Levin.
Yeah, oh, Levin, sorry, I apologize. Yeah, glad to see you here. Gloria is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to where to donate things. She's a great asset to our Downsizers Club.
Great. Welcome, Gloria.
You?
Still
Frisia,
adding
somebody
people
was named
here.
for a flower. How lovely,
I
Frisia.
know.
Helen, I know Helen. Good morning, Helen. Nice to see you here. And Phyllis and Mary and everybody else.
Okay. We've got one more person here.
Oh, that's my autopilot. I haven't figured out how to turn that thing off. You can decline that.
Oh, okay. Right, I think that's okay. Okay, well, again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Angelique Jackson, and I'm the Business Development and Marketing Manager at Charles E. Smith Life Communities. Our organization takes pride in providing personalized care and experiences tailored to the unique needs of older adults. No matter what stage of life they're in, we offer a variety of services, including independent living at Ring House, affordable independent living at Revit's House, assisted living at Landau House, memory care at Cohen Rosen House, and post-acute and long-term care at Hebrew Home of Greater Washington, primary care at Hirsch Health Center, and Elder Safe Center, the first program of its kind in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area that provides community education, advocacy, and safe temporary shelter to older adults experiencing abuse. If you're interested in learning more about our residences and services, please visit our website at smithlifecommunities.org or give us a call at the Welcome Center to schedule a tour. And all of that information will be available in the chat for your convenience. So just a few reminders before we begin. We want to hear from you. So please add your questions to the chat. And we are recording this program for use in the future. So please make sure that you are muted as a courtesy to other attendees as well so that they can hear. And so please join us in welcoming our guest experts. Today, we're going to be discussing getting your affairs in order, the essential legal documents that you need. And I will begin by passing the virtual mic to Jan Brito with Capital Senior Solutions, our real estate partner, to introduce the rest of the panelists. And thank you, Jan, for joining us today.
Thank you, Angelique, and welcome everyone. My name is Jan Brito. I am with Brito Associates of Compass, and our division called Capital Senior Solutions specializes in helping older adults through late in life move transitions. And I'll talk a little bit more about what I do later. Right now, I'd like each one of our panelists to introduce themselves prior to going into our presentation. So why don't we start with Alex Seleznev?
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you, Jane. Glad to present with you and everyone else today. So yes, my name is Alex Lesnev. I'm a certified financial planner and chartered financial analyst. I'm also the founder and president of Capital Squared Financial, or CSF for short, and we specialize in retirement planning. And what I like to say, when say specialize in retirement planning, that is all we do. We work with people who are thinking about transitioning or already in retirement. What makes us unique? Every single client we have has a financial plan in place. It's not always complex. In many cases, it's actually rather simple, and that's by design. Every single client has a specific investment strategy based on his or her specific needs. And also, we're very heavy into tax planning. And that is, a little bit of my background. I used to be a partner at actually 2 CPA firms in the past. So that's where that piece is coming from. Yep. So again, great to be with you today.
Thank you, Alex. Megan, would you like to go next? Megan Campbell.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Megan Campbell. I am an estate planning attorney with Willow Legal Group. We do estate planning and elder law, and our estate planning is goal-based estate plans. So estate planning is not one size fits all. It is based upon what your goals are and what your objectives are. And so that's how we create our estate plans for you.
Thank you, Megan. Mike Goodell.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Jen. My name is Mike Goodell. I represent Fairfax Memorial Park Cemetery and Funeral Home here in Northern Virginia. As the Director of Advanced Planning, we help people pre-plan final arrangements. As we say, it's not an if, it's a when. And we're not taxes, we're the other one. So just like Alex and everyone else, everything that we do is customized to the individual to make sure that your individual wishes and desires for your final placement and final wishes are seen through to your satisfaction. So that is what I do, and we're here to help with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We will now start our presentation. Again, I mentioned that our firm, Capital Senior Solutions, specializes in helping older adults through late in life move transitions. My business partner, Laura Quigley, and I founded this in 2020, although I've been practicing real estate in the local area for 19 years. In 2020, I saw a need for greater service to the older population. And so I sought a higher level of education so I could be more effective in my relationships. I discovered the Seniors Real Estate Institute in Oklahoma City and took a course from them in 2020 that took me a year to complete, which is really unusual for real estate classes because they're usually a day or two. This was a very intense graduate level type of course that I had to be interviewed after completing the coursework to be given the designation I got, which is called Certified Senior Housing Specialist. I also went on to get certified as a senior downsizing coach because, as many of you know, when you start thinking about downsizing or moving, it can be very overwhelming, and sometimes a little coaching can come in handy. Whoops, I pulled up the wrong presentation. My apologies. Bear with me just one moment. Talk amongst yourselves.
What gorgeous weather we're having today, huh?
Absolutely.
I do say so myself.
Oh my, cherry blossoms are starting to come in. Spring came on a Wednesday. That's what we'll remember because it's going to be 80 degrees tomorrow.
Oh, is
I
that
love
right,
it.
Mike?
Love it,
Wow.
love it, love it.
Love it.
Okay, here we go. The truth about getting your affairs in order. That is today's topic. And you've met our panelists. This is their contact information. We'll have another slide at the end with their contact information. And so let's start with a question posed to all of the panelists. How important is it for you to collaborate when making a comprehensive plan for a client? How does your work dovetail? And any of the three of you can jump in.
Sure.
Well, I guess
I'll start. We work closely with both financial advisors and folks that help our clients make pre-planned arrangements very closely with financial advisors, so we can say, right, no matter what your plan is, we work together to make sure it works the way you want it to work. And then we talk to clients often about pre-planning for their funerals, mostly because one, it's a expense that you can make if you're thinking about Medicaid. planning, but also, as I'll talk more about later, it makes things so much easier for your family. And it's such a great thing that you can do now to help your family during a time of grief.
Thank you for that segue, Megan. As far as pre-planning funeral and cemetery, you're exactly right. It saves on two fronts. First, there's the financial savings. Can be done in advance, can be paid over time. People tend to spend 35% more in an at-need situation because it's an emotional spend. When you pre-plan, you can think about and weigh your options of what you like. But more importantly, it also is the emotional cost. If any one of you has ever had to make arrangements for a loved one, either things were pre-planned and everything went smoothly, or nothing was planned, it was total chaos. The emotional value of pre-planning funeral and cemetery to your loved ones is so much more than just money. So thank you.
I imagine you could consider it a gift to your family, in a
Oh,
sense.
tremendously so. It's the greatest gift. And in the Jewish culture, it's called the greatest mitzvah, an act of kindness that cannot be repaid.
Yeah, so in terms of, my perspective from a financial planner's perspective, this is probably a quarter, if not a third of what I do, meaning collaborating with our professionals. In fact, at Capital Squared, we have an ecosystem of professionals that we work with that specialize in, seniors essentially, CPAs that focus on more, more tax complex strategies, realtors, of course, such as Jan, Megan. So it's very important to collaborate because again, that's a big part of what we do is designing a comprehensive financial plan.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's important to make sure that your professional advisors are all communicating with each other to create that
Absolutely.
holistic plan. Yeah. All right, moving on. Whoops. So this next question could probably be posed to both Megan and Alex. What happens if something goes wrong with your account? What protections are in place? How do you keep the client's information secure? And, with financial matters, privacy is a concern. So would you like to start with that, Alex?
Well, absolutely. So we partner with Schwab Institutional when it comes to, making sure that your accounts are secure, and they have state-of-the-art security system. And it's interesting. Every year I have to take a class as a continuing education class about cybersecurity. So I took it earlier this year, at the end of January, actually, and it's amazing what they have in place and how simple it is on the surface, but how much is done, behind the scenes, so to speak. I'll say three things here in terms of security in general. It all starts with you, and that's very important. It all starts with our clients, essentially. Every so often, and I discourage people to do that, but that happens every so often. People send us statements by email, and we can protect them on our end, but there's not much that can be done while they're being transmitted to us. We have a client portal for those purposes. In terms of accessing your account at Schwab and other financial institutions as well, the best way to do that is to set up the so-called two-way authentication. So you enter your login and password, and then they send you a code, to your cell phone. So you need to enter that code. And again, back to the very first point I made, because things happen to me personally as well. You just have to be aware of what's going on. And anytime you get those links when they're asking you to click on something and you're not aware exactly what that is, but you still click, we have to be very careful, because very frequently, it looks like it comes from a legitimate source when in practice that's not really the case. So.
And from a real estate perspective, once your home is under contract, your realtor should advise you of what the next steps are. For instance, one of the first things that will happen is you'll get an email from the title company requesting some seller information. For instance, if you have a mortgage still to pay off, they'll need that account number and your permission to get the payoff info. They may ask for your social security number. And most title companies these days are no longer requesting this information directly through email. They have secure portals such as the one Alex referenced. And it's okay to click that button. But if you have any doubt, like I just had a family do that with me this week, I received this, is this legitimate? And I said, yes, it's fine. Feel safe. submitting that information. So your information will be kept secure. And one thing, realtors do not need your social security number. Be very stingy with who you give that to. Your realtor does not need it. So
No.
anyone else want to comment on that? Protections for client information?
Yeah, I'd say we set up vaults for our clients for their estate planning documents. So after you receive your document, you receive it in what we call a legacy vault, and that is secured just for you. You are able to then share documents on a document by document basis with who needs it. So that limits access. You're not giving everybody access to your estate planning portfolio, only people that need access to certain documents. So that helps you not only want to make sure that your personal information is secure, but if you have documents like a power of attorney that are immediately effective, that only the people that you trust have access to that document.
Oh, very good points. So I think I'll stop share now and turn it over to Megan, who is going to talk more about the legal issues.
We share. All right. Tell me when that's up.
It's up.
All right, great. So we kind of just talked about this a little bit earlier, but the way I like to talk about estate planning is it's really the greatest gift that you can give your family. And so how does that translate? What do we mean when we talk about estate planning? So estate planning allows you to control your property while you're alive and well, provide for yourself and your loved ones if you become disabled, give what you have, but be able to give it to who you want, the way you want it, and when you want it. And then finally, estate planning can minimize the impact of taxes, professional fees, court costs, etc. So what's in a typical estate plan? The first set of documents, a will or a revocable living trust, are documents that are effective upon death. Your trust does have provisions that work during your lifetime. And then your incapacity documents, your healthcare directives and living will, and financial powers of attorney. So let's talk a little bit more about how is estate planning a gift and how do all these documents work? So first, in talking about incapacity planning, this is who can make decisions for you when you can't, when you're hospitalized and incapacitated, or have, dementia or have other reasons why you can't make these decisions on your own. So these are your healthcare directives and your living will that decides who makes your healthcare decisions for you, who can access your medical records, and under what circumstances do you want life support or other end-of-life decisions, and how do you want those decisions to be made? And then your financial power of attorney determines who's going to handle your financial and legal affairs. So what's the gift in all of these documents? It's identifying who should be the decision maker. So picking one person to be that final decision maker and reducing the amount of conflict and time of stress. We often have clients that come to us and say, well, I have 2 kids and I want them both to decide jointly and together. And, that's great. But in the end, if there's ever a conflict, you want one person to make that decision. And if you think back to a time we have to talk about it, I say, okay, that's great. But if your kids ever had a disagreement on, oh yeah, they get along great now. And so just picking that one person, and sometimes it means giving one child the power of attorney and the other child the, initial responsibility for healthcare decisions. So it's a way to kind of split, but picking that one person, because if they can't make a decision, the ultimate decision maker will be the court. And that adds additional cost and stress to an already stressful time. And then finally, providing guidance on your wishes, right? What is it that you want in those end of life decisions? If you were hospitalized and unable to speak for yourself, what treatment do you want? And that really is the gift of allowing your family to make a decision and know that's the decision that you would want. And so they're not having to second guess themselves of, oh, did I do the right thing? Is that what mom or dad would have wanted? They can just make the decision and be at peace with that choice. So moving on to what happens, how do you pass on your assets? There are 3 options: no plan whatsoever. The state of Maryland, or whatever state you are living in at the time, has a default plan for you, including who would act as your personal representative and how your assets would pass. That works for some people, but not for most. So your other options are using a living will or a revocable living trust. So in both of those documents, you decide who will be your personal representative, who will be your trustee. So who will be the people responsible for carrying out your wishes when you pass? Either that's through the probate process of using a will, or through the trust administration process using a trust. You also are able to determine who gets your assets in what amounts and when. So if you are planning for minor children, anyone with substance abuse problems, you're able to control, right? How do they get that money? Or do they get it in trust with someone to kind of look out for their best interests? If you're planning to leave some funds for your grandchildren, is there a way that you want to earmark that money or put some controls around that money? As I mentioned before, wills go through the probate process. That is a court process that the court oversees the distribution of your assets. The trust administration process is a private process and does not have the court administration over it. So these are some common misconceptions we hear from people about, oh, I have a will, everything's good, but wills don't cover everything. So one thing a will doesn't do is it doesn't grant immediate access to accounts that are solely owned in your name. So your bank account is in your name. If your family members need to pay for those funeral expenses because they haven't been prepaid for, those are going to come out of their pockets because your bank accounts aren't accessible. Any, mortgage payments or any of those that need to be paid, those would come out of personal accounts until the probate estate is open and that money is accessible. Wills don't include jointly owned assets or assets with beneficiary designations. Those assets, if they're jointly owned, pass to the joint owner. So we often hear people say, oh, I'm just going to add my kids to the bank account and then they'll be fine. It'll avoid probate. It'll go to them. But that opens your account up to liability for them. And if you just put one kid on the bank account, you have multiple adult children, it transfers all to that one child and they don't have to give it to siblings. It is their money at that point upon your passing and they can do what they want. Beneficiary designations also avoid probate. So you can, if you don't have any concerns with your heirs receiving things outright, you can update your beneficiary designations to go directly to the individuals you want. Wills don't cover any tax planning. Wills don't cover any of those incapacity situations. They are not effective until you have passed away. So any emergency or temporary situations are not applicable. And then finally, the probate process is public. Your will and your asset accounts are all publicly available on the Register of Wills website for folks that want to go in and look up that information. So, and finally, just to talk a little bit about trusts and how revocable trusts work and the difference between a trust and a will. The first kind of major benefit is avoiding probate. You do not have to go through the court process and have the court oversight. That allows you to move as fast or as slow as you want. The probate process in Maryland takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So that will save your loved ones a lot of time and often a lot of money. Trusts are completely private because they avoid the probate process. How your assets are distributed are not public information. No one can find that information online. And then it gives you a little bit more control over how your assets are distributed, and you can provide additional asset protection for your loved ones. So, and finally, the gift in all of this, right, is allowing your family members to focus on the grief process and each other. If you're using a trust, there is no rush to get access to bank accounts, open the probate estate. They have access to those bank accounts if they're properly titled, so they can pay expenses and not worry. Again, avoiding conflict. You've laid your wishes out clearly. Everyone knows who's in charge and what you want. And so there's no conflict between your loved ones. And then finally, potentially avoiding taxes and protecting assets on the money that you've worked hard to earn. And so you want to protect as much of it as you can. And that's it. I will drop in a chat. My gift to everybody here is a checklist for 25 things to review in your estate plan. So you can use that to just do a check and make sure whether or not it's, needs to be reviewed or taken another look at.
Thank you, Megan. Really great information. We can open it up for any questions for Megan at this point. I'll kick it off though with one, Megan. Once you create all these documents, how often should they be reviewed?
Yeah, so we think they should be reviewed every 3 years at least. We will check in with clients every 3 years because we know that this isn't something on your to-do list. I know folks like Alex will also kind of do a check-in and say, have you looked at this? But just saying, are these the right people still? Have any of these people changed? Oftentimes the cycle of estate planning that we see is people do their first estate plan when their children are young to name guardians. We see an update again upon, retirement or so. And then sometimes a third one if anyone's doing specific Medicaid planning or elder law planning.
We have a couple questions in the chat. What's the role of a bank trust company?
Yeah, so the role of a bank trust company is often they will act as a independent trustee. So they will be paid to act in that role of a successor trustee. It often, we see it most often in folks that are either solo agers or folks that want to have an independent third party involved in the trust admin process or the trust administration.
Great. Megan did just post the link to her document. That is a gift to you all. It's in the chat. Angelique will also be sending it post-event in case you have difficulty clicking the link. Thank you very much. I do have one more question though. Talk about people changing. So you've named your beneficiary or your trustee. Is it important to have a like a successor named as well? Should that initial person become incapacitated in any way?
Yeah, so we always think in terms of 3, right? So we ask clients to think of 3 people. So you have your initial trustees or agents under your powers of attorney, and then a backup, and then one more. So 3 people is a good rule of thumb and best practice in that. And everything, when you talk with an estate planning attorney, they will always ask, I think the hardest question is, who are those remote contingent beneficiaries? If, you and your entire extended family are on a Disney cruise and something happens, what do you do, right? And no one's left to inherit. The default is it goes to your heirs, so they'll look for the next living family members. But a lot of people say, at that point, I really want to include some charities. I really want to make sure if they're, my children and grandchildren are alive, let's look at charities or other people.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's switch back to the presentation. Where did it go? There it is. So Mike Adele, I'd like you to speak to this slide and tell us all about everything we need to know about pre-planning.
Certainly. Thanks, Jen. So in pre-planning, it comes down to 4 basic steps. The 4 basic steps in pre-planning funeral and cemetery is first reflecting. Think about what you want, what's important to you. family traditions, religious, non-religious. What is important to you? The second thing is called recording, writing some of these life choices down of what you wish. Is it a particular cemetery? Is it a particular funeral home? Are there certain things that you want, like a bagpiper at your final send off? Those sorts of things. So write some of those wishes down. Every funeral home and cemetery has a pre-planning guide, as I do myself. I'll be glad to share with you. It's got the 134 questions that will be asked and answered when someone passes away. Not if they'll be asked, they will. And as Megan said in her presentation, the biggest question is this what the loved one wanted, or am I doing everything right? By taking the steps in pre-planning like this, you definitely answer those questions. The third step in this is securing it. All of us have great ideas, all these great financial plans, but you actually have to back it a little bit, right? Put the plan in place, secure the contract, make sure that these documents are filled out completely and secured. You have to move forward with that final step. And the fourth and final step is sharing this with your loved ones, making sure that everyone knows that these are my final wishes. This is how we're going to proceed upon my passing. Also, to echo what Megan said, in the pre-planning, the harmony is a very important piece. Personal story, I come from a very large family. I'm the youngest of, get this, 10 kids. Really, it's true. My siblings all had a different idea of how they wanted to honor my dad at the time of his passing. He had prearranged everything. So when I said, hey, no, I know that you want to do this and you want to do this, here is what dad's wishes were. So without realizing it, he created harmony among my family that we were going to share those. So it is truly a gift to those you left behind. It's very much, think of all the times that family has been together. You've been out for a family meal. People always come together, right? Same thing happens at your funeral. People are going to come together. They're going to talk. They're going to tell stories. They're going to share some love. And at the end of it all, if you've prearranged everything, it's like saying, don't worry, I've got the check. We're going to move forward. It is truly one of the best gifts that you can give to your loved ones is pre-planning and prearranging. And again, every funeral home and every cemetery has a prearrangement plan. And every plan is just as different as the individuals which we serve. The most important thing is to make sure that your wishes are honored. Additionally, planning a little bit for the future. This is your legacy. With the advent of Ancestry.com and all those other things, a week doesn't go by when I'm here at the cemetery, someone doesn't come by and say, hey, I think my grandparents or great-grandparents are here. We can look them up in the registry and take the loved one to that site. It's a very important thing to do to make sure that your legacy is secured. And also, no one goes through life alone. You either have a spouse, children, loved ones. In pre-planning funeral and cemetery, just as you're pre-planning your finances to take care of them when you've passed away, passing along your assets, how about a family plot? Are we looking at single, companion, or family unity when you start to pre-plan? That's one of the things that you can pre-plan as another gift to your children. It makes perfect sense, again, financially and emotionally, to do this. So that's a quick 5-minute synopsis about what it is to pre-plan cemetery and funeral.
Well, I do have a question. You mentioned documents, the planning documents.
Yes.
Where's the safest place to keep them? Because I remember hearing a story about some documents being in a safe deposit box that couldn't be accessed by any family members. And so all the, burial plans had to be postponed. What a
Yes.
horrible situation.
Yes. Excellent question, Jan. So I recommend, the planning guide that we have, it can be filled out, completed. Share this with whoever your executor is. This document should not be kept with your will because a will is generally read after the services take place. This is needed immediately. This will say who the funeral home is, where the information is kept, where the pre-arrangements are made. So my best recommendation is for the planning guide to be shared with whoever your executor of your estate is, or whoever will carry out your wishes.
And are there, you have originals and copies. Where should the originals be kept?
The originals and scans are all kept at the cemetery and the funeral home. So copies is fine. The original can be kept with the original, with the owner who prepared the document. It's also a good idea, best practice, in addition to having your next of kin having or your executor, keep a copy of it with your will, just so it keeps everything together in one place.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions for Mike? You can unmute yourself and ask or pop them into the chat. And if not, we will move on. Bear with me. Whoops. Wait, this is where we want to start, I think. Alex, we'll move to you.
All
What
right.
documentation issues can create issues for people preparing to transfer property? And some of the examples are Maryland non-resident withholding and when to change your address.
So I have a feeling this is more for Megan, this type of question.
Okay,
Or this is a Jan question. This is a realtor question, Jan.
okay, I can
Well,
handle that.
actually, for you.
So if you own a home in Maryland and say you had a second home in Florida or Arizona or somewhere else, and as you got older, you started spending more time in your second home and you decide to change your primary address to that second home, but you still own a home in Maryland. When the time comes to sell that home in Maryland, you could be subject to an 8.5% Maryland non-resident withholding tax on your profits, which can hurt. So before you change your physical address, if you still own a home in Maryland, check with your realtor, your financial advisor, or your attorney, because that is a tax you do not want to get stuck with. So that's what I would say about that. Now, let's turn it over to Alex to talk about comprehensive financial planning.
Now, this is definitely my slide. So
Yes.
I'll start with the definition of comprehensive financial planning. Of course, there are dozens of them, and there's nothing wrong with different approaches to that. But I like to describe it as a three-step process. When you assess, you plan, and you implement. Usually during the assessment stage, at least the way we approach this, we ask our clients, well, how do you envision this? And in terms of, again, retirement planning, which is our specialty, that is usually my question. How would you describe it in your own words? We don't necessarily have to talk about the numbers, even though that's usually part of the conversation. But when would you like to retire? Exactly where? Would you like to perhaps continue to work part-time, which is a very common response to that question? And the idea really, as part of the assessment stage, is to determine what the goals and objectives are going to be. Would normally collect your information. There's a checklist for all of that. And that leads to the second stage, which is the planning piece. Usually that entails a financial planning meeting, can at least an hour, and they tend to be quite comprehensive, anywhere between 1 to maybe 2 hours, where we talk about things such as cash flow and budgeting, risk management and insurance, asset allocation investments, tax optimization strategies. We usually touch on estate planning, of course, and then connect our clients with someone like Megan. Once we have that meeting, that leads to the implementation stage, and usually, depending on the type of engagement, either Capital Squared implements the plan, or in some cases, our clients actually want to be responsible for that. So that's what comprehensive financial planning is. Now, very briefly, I will say this. What comprehensive financial planning is not is when someone collects your information, puts together a projection, usually takes them 30 minutes or so, and just gives you the outcome. That is not a comprehensive financial plan, even though in many cases you're getting some kind of generic 30+ page document. So in terms of, again, 3 issues to consider post-retirement, and in some sense I touched on that, and the first one, and perhaps the most important one, I see it all the time. I'm going to say more than half of my new clients experience that. This are, again, this generic plans. And usually what does that entail? The typical assumption is when someone is in his or her late 60s, maybe early 70s, by default, they have to invest more conservatively. Well, that is simply not true for everyone. On average, perhaps that is the case. I happen to agree with that. But what if that person is still working full time or perhaps part time? What if they have other sources of income? Of course, the first one that comes to mind is your social security income. What if they have pension income? And a good quarter of our clients are current or former government employees, so the part of the first system. There are many other personal factors. Perhaps they're expecting some kind of inheritance in the future. So there's no reason for them to automatically invest more conservatively. The other piece, which is also part of the same issue, you have to plan for the long term. In terms of the projections I discussed, we normally run them at least to age 95. So if you can imagine someone retiring, let's say at the age of 70, they still have 25 years ahead of them. So the money really needs to last for a long time. So that's number one. The third issue is more technical in nature. But again, when you have a plan, generic plan or retirement plan, well, exactly how are you going to draw from your accounts? Let's say you have a brokerage account, you have a traditional IRA, and you have a Roth 401k. I'll just, came up with this example. Exactly how and when are you going to draw from those accounts? And in many cases, that does boil down to, the overall tax efficiency and tax optimization of your portfolio. Again, in many cases, people just don't have that in place. And then the third piece, and usually that mostly applies to refer to this group as young retirees. Those usually between the age of, let's say, early 60s to age 73. And the reason I say 73, because that is your required minimum distribution age. That presents many opportunities to do things such as Roth conversions or backdoor Roth conversions. So what happened actually earlier this year, new clients that joined the firm, they have significant assets. The portfolio is doing well, no issues with that. The husband turned 72, so there's one more year before he's going to collect his or needs to take the funds out of his IRA. The wife is 73. Over the past 10 years, they did nothing about that. No Roth conversions, no tax planning of any kind. So I was blunt with them in our intro meetings. I was like, look, all of this assets that you have in appreciation, this is your tax debt. And you're going to be paying a lot when you retire. So keep those things in mind. In terms of gifting strategies, that usually comes up, not necessarily in the first meeting, but usually in the second, maybe third year, when people usually get more interested in that. I'll just say this: gifting cash is usually the least advantageous from the tax perspective. I don't mean it's a bad choice, but it's the least advantageous. If you have appreciated stock, that is a great choice. Let's say you want to gift some to the next generation. Perhaps they can keep the stock or they can sell it, and let's say they're in a lower tax bracket. If you gift it to a charity, they of course don't care what type of assets they receive, because they're not going to pay anything, and you still get a tax deduction. Many people are aware, but some are not. So I'll mention this. When you turn 73, and you can actually start doing this at the age of 70 and a half, you can gift a portion of your RMD or required minimum distribution to different charities. That can save you a lot in taxes, again, if you have the charitable intent. If you do not have any IRA accounts, or they're small and you just don't want to deplete them, but you still have the charitable intent, you can create a donor advised fund and transfer appreciated stock to the fund, so you can get a tax deduction in the year of contribution, and then decide in the future exactly what charities receive the money. So there are a lot of different ways, again, to satisfy your your charitable intent, and also save on taxes at the same time.
Alex, I have a question before we move on. Say you turn 73 and you have to start taking the required minimum distribution. With so many people living longer and working longer and delaying retirement, I suppose you could take that distribution and reinvest it somewhere else. Is that allowed? I mean,
Absolutely, Jan. And this is such a great question. And sometimes people assume, that they have to take the money out, which is the case, and then in some sense they have to spend it. Well, not really. You just take the funds out, you pay taxes, and usually I recommend that you do that in October, November, maybe even in December. So you gain that additional year of tax deferred growth. And then you simply reinvest, the difference in your brokerage account. So you don't have to spend it
And
if you don't need to.
earn more. That's awesome.
That's exactly right.
All right. Are there any questions for Alex? You can unmute yourself or put your questions in the chat. Let's see what we have on the next slide. This is another one for Alex, I believe. When considering liquidating assets, what should I sell first?
Yeah, so this is where I guess I'll give some examples here. So a typical approach, or perhaps think of it a generic approach, and I don't mean it in a negative way necessarily, is when people start, when they retire, right? They start with their brokerage accounts, because anytime you sell assets in your investment or brokerage accounts, if those accounts accumulated capital gains, you'll be paying a capital gains tax, which for most people is 15% plus state. But that's a relatively tax efficient strategy. Again, once they reach their 73rd birthday, they begin to take the funds out of their IRA accounts because it's a requirement. And then throughout their retirement period, eventually they begin to tap into their Roth accounts. That is your typical approach. Now, what happens again when someone is a young retiree? Let's say this person decided to retire at the age of 62, or they're working part-time. So up until their age 73, because again, that's the RMD age, they're in this artificially low income years, which is how I usually refer to that. That usually, not always, but usually creates great opportunities to do things such as Roth conversions. Now, if you don't want to do that, but you still need some money out of your portfolio, perhaps it does make sense for you to take funds out of your traditional IRA or 401k account, pay taxes, but you would be paying them at a much lower rate because you're not collecting your Social Security yet, you're not working. So as a result of that, again, it can greatly benefit you. And that again refers to the second point I made earlier, when many retirees or soon to be retirees, they have this generic plan in place, but they don't have a specific withdrawal strategy as part of their plan.
Thank you,
Next
Alex.
slide,
I would say
please.
from a real estate perspective, when you're selling your home, you are most likely going to be subject to some capital gains tax. And if you are able to come up with receipts and a list of improvements you've made over the years that you've owned the home, that can offset, I believe, Alex, tell me if I'm wrong, that can offset some of the capital gains.
Absolutely, Jan. And if you don't mind switching to the next slide, because that's what we're going to cover, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So what happens in terms of this comment or question, when someone decides to sell their house, their home, I absolutely recommend that they do some math. In many cases, they can do it on their own, but if you're struggling, you can always reach out to a professional. But the way it works, you start, of course, with the anticipated sale price. Let's make it $1 million. We'll just keep it simple. Now I work with the assumption that you know how much you paid for the house. So let's make it $300,000. If you're selling it jointly and assuming that you lived in that house at least for the past over the past 5 years, well, the homeowner's exclusion of $500,000 is going to apply. So that's going to be added to the basis or the purchase price. So it goes from 300,000 in my example to 800,000. Now, what Jen was just referring to, let's say you've been living in this house for 10, 15 plus years, there's a good possibility that you've been, improving the property. So as long as you can document those improvements, you can add the value of those improvements to the cost basis. So let's say you've done some major renovations. The cost of those renovations was $100,000. So that adds to the basis. So now it's 900,000. So when you start calculating, there were some selling costs would be added to. So the actual capital gain taxes would be on that difference. So keep that in mind. Again, I strongly recommend that people do this math. It's usually not all that complex, just so there are no surprises in terms of your potential tax liability.
Yeah, and Jan, can I just add in there quickly, as we often talk to folks that add their children to their home to pass it on. And the problem with that is graded passes to your kids and avoids the probate process, but your kids lose the step up in basis. So they will be paying capital gains tax based on the price in which you purchased it. Where if they inherit the house, they receive a step up and the capital gains is calculated from the date of your passing or the last to pass. And so there's a huge savings, especially over the last few years there. So while it avoids probate, it definitely will leave your children with potentially a bigger tax bill.
Wow, that's really good to know. Thank you, Megan.
Point. Yeah, so in terms of the benefits of homestead exemption, in many cases it's automatic, but if you're interested in checking what it is, you can always find this information on your real estate tax bill. But essentially, it caps the annual assessments, on the property. It gives you a credit. I get this question every so often, and I don't mind checking for my clients because again, it's public information, and usually it's applied automatically. But again, if you're unsure, it would make sense for you to double check.
All right, actions you can take now. I'll open it up to all three of the panelists and see what you might recommend for that.
So I'll start just because this is something a little bit different than, pulling together documents, but capturing your legacy, right? We talk a lot about things you do in this presentation in which, you might need guidance from an attorney or a funeral director or a CPA. But I think one of the biggest things you can give your family and things that are getting lost is that legacy and the stories and memories and capturing all of that. So I always like to remind people, right, to spend some time capturing those important things in your life, even if it is as simple as taking photographs and writing who the people are and what the event is on the back, because that means a lot to your family members who, when you've passed, to be able to have that memory and to know, right? Oh, that's who these people are and this is what happened. So, pictures or writing down some of those stories that will get lost otherwise.
I think that's a great idea. I guess you could also do videos, right? How cool would that be?
You can, and that's one of the things we do with clients, because I know I can tell everybody, go out and do this, and oh yeah, Megan, that's a great idea. But capturing it on video, right? And having someone ask you questions or share those stories, or if you are doing any of this for your children or grandchildren, right? School projects, record it on video, because your day-to-day life doesn't seem, all that spectacular to you, but when you've passed, it's those ordinary moments that your family really misses, picking up the phone and calling you and hearing your voice or hearing that story or that thing that you always used to say. And after time it fades, and it's, probably one of the most precious gifts that you can leave for people. And you don't need us. You can do this on your own in your time to leave this for your family.
Great suggestion.
And also in pre-planning is the act of moving the future to the present so you can do something about it today, right? So in pre-planning funeral and cemetery arrangements, you can take care of all this today. Lock in today's price, pay it all off. Don't use this for 30 or 40 years. It's already all paid for. Cemetery and funeral home prices double every 10 years, right? Think of your home. What did you buy it for 20, 30 years ago, right? Versus today's prices in today's market. Funeral and cemetery are the same. These prices will go up. Lock in the price now. Take action about pre-planning. It's a huge financial gift to your children. Again, something you can do today that you won't have to worry about tomorrow. And the sooner you do it, the more you're able to lock in today's lower price.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, so my, actions you can take now, and Jan, you've heard me say this before, I believe that, everyone should have a plan in place, financial plan in place. And usually I say right away, I'm biased, I'm a financial planner, and I truly believe in that. If any of the participants are thinking about retirement over the next 5-7 years, or perhaps even sooner, I would certainly make sure that it's a retirement specific plan. Now, the second comment I want to make, because this is what usually happens, and I know for a fact that it's happening now, when the markets are this strong, people tend to fall asleep at the wheel. They look at their accounts, they look at their monthly statements, so it goes up by 10%, 15% or so, and they do nothing about it. Again, if you're thinking about retirement over the next 2 to 3 years, this would be a perfect time to also review your investment strategy. I don't want to go in too much detail because this is a different type of seminar, but again, actions you can take now. The markets are this high. Consider rebalancing your portfolio.
All wonderful suggestions. So again, I'd like to thank Alex Seleznev with Capital Squared Financial, Mike Goodell, Advanced Planning Director with Fairfax Memorial Park, and Megan Campbell, Estate Attorney with Willow Legal Group. I'd also like to let everyone know about Capital Senior Solutions' free monthly Downsizers Club. We meet the first Friday of every month on Zoom at 11 a.m., and it's a small support group for people who may not know what they're doing next in terms of planning a move, whether it be to downsize or to move to a senior community, or perhaps you're thinking of aging in place. We have members in our club that are from all of those categories, and we provide resources and discuss challenges and share success stories. And we provide homework every month, and the attendees report back the following month, because to start the downsizing process, you have to take it a step at a time and start slowly. So we help people through that. I'd also like to mention that Megan does regular seminars with Willow Legal Group, and we shared her contact information early on in the slideshow. You'll have it as well in Angelique's follow-up email. But if you'd like to sign up for her seminars, you're welcome to do so. Alex Seleznev also does a lot of webinars on financial topics that you might be interested in hearing as well. So I see some things in the chat. Let me see what we've got here. I'll stop sharing now. Okay.
Just some
Angelique
commenting. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. And Angelique posted a link in the chat about some upcoming programs that Charles E. Smith Life Communities is offering. If you'd like to see other seminars produced by Capital Senior Solutions, you can go to our website and check the seminars page for a list of upcoming seminars, as well as registrations for the Senior Downsizers Club. With that, I'll turn it back over to Angelique.
I just want to say again, thank you for everyone who attended. And thank you so much for our expert guests, Jan, Megan, Mike, and Alex, for such a wonderful presentation and, framing of the gift of pre-planning, not just for you, but for your loved ones. Again, I will make sure to provide all of the resources that our presenters discussed during our presentation for you in the post-event email. And yes, to answer the comment in the chat, we did record this, so there will be a link for you to access that as well. Again, everybody have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you at the next event.
Thank you, Angelique. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.